Well, this is Russell's last night in London, and before he left, he caught a play, a Henrik Ibsen play called An Enemy of the People. And this is a wonderful piece of writing. I read this play a very long time ago. But talk about a play that is super relevant to what's going on now in so many ways. And apparently this adaptation was a very stinging critique of the aforementioned liberal class. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
See, this is why I wanted to see it, because it was very clear to me why you would want to do this play at this particular moment. For anybody who doesn't know, it's kind of a 19th century version of Jaws. Where the town doesn't want to acknowledge it has a problem because it's going to cost them economically.
So there's a local doctor who discovers that a spa has contaminated water.
And it's a spa town. The whole town is based on this spa. The whole economy is based on it. And he discovers that it's poison and assumes that everyone's going to applaud him as a hero. Right, because he revealed this great problem, and of course they all turn against him, and it's a very timely play at this moment of broad social corruption. Now, if anyone's a Doctor Who fan, fun fact about me: even though I liked sci-fi from childhood, and they used to play it on Sundays when I was growing up, I never got into Doctor Who, but Matt Smith played Doctor Who for a couple seasons. But particularly in England, a lot of people who pop up on TV are actually theater actors who, go back and forth. So he's really a theater actor. And he was very good as the lead. So this was rewritten and reconceived by Thomas Ostermeyer. It's completely rewritten, set in modern times. He really did his own thing with it. And what he did with it was really great. So you can see here, this was what you saw when you came in. You couldn't take pictures during the show. But you get a certain sense of it just from this. I am what I am. The latest marketing slogan by an American sports shoe producer is not simply a advertising campaign, but a military campaign, a war cry directed against everything that exists between beings, against everything that constitutes everything that invisibly links them, everything that prevents complete dissolution. So this was a really interesting approach and a very modern critique. And they turned the whole second act basically into a town hall where the leading members of the town basically debated with the audience. They gave microphones to the audience. And this was after the protagonist, which, this is not in the original play, gives this very impassioned speech that ends up being a critique of the liberal class. Because they forbid him to talk about the water. So instead he talks about the general corruption of the society. And he says this corruption, it can really be laid at the feet of the liberal class. It's the liberal class that puts a veneer of morality over this underlying corruption that has pervaded the entire society. And at that point, because they hadn't let people start talking yet, but it was clearly being opened up to the audience, they turned on the house lights. So when he said, I blame the liberal class, I was sitting in the second row, like right down through him. I went, now, because the theater audience is largely made up of the liberal class, I didn't get a lot of clapping. Now, one interesting observation, because I saw this with my daughter, the first few people who spoke were Americans. And Eden said that she has often observed that, and British people kind of commonly speak about this, that Americans are kind of brought up to be confident like that,
right?
To speak like that. And she felt it was telling that Americans were the first ones that spoke like they kind of had to break the ice before British, and some British people start getting in it. But particularly because of the problems and complaints that I have with what's happened to the arts in general in America, but particularly theater. Ironically, they're doing, or I guess it makes sense because it is so timely. Keaton tells me they're doing a New York City production of this.
They
not
are.
related
So yeah,
to this.
somebody asked us, where is this playing? So the production that Russell saw is in London, but they actually are doing
The Duke of York Theater.
The Duke of York Theater. They're actually, this is coming, I think it's to Broadway. It might be off Broadway, but I think it's to Broadway. Michael Imperioli, who played Christopher in the
Okay, but
Sopranos,
listen, it's going to
is
be
in it.
complete. Yeah, it's going to be completely different because this is a total reimagining of this play. You know, they kept the core plot and the core characters, but completely modernized it. And that whole town hall thing, obviously, is their invention. It was great. It worked beautifully. It was amazing. It gave me a lot of ideas. It really inspired me for what I want to do because I've wanted to find a way to introduce a kind of live theater element to the overall DueDissidence project. But I've really been thinking about, I don't want it to be a bunch of actors trying to get a fucking gig with HBO or an agent. I don't want to deal with that shit. I want to do theater that's more based in the community. The idea of taking plays like that and bringing people in who are really activists and deconstructing these scripts and bringing in audience participation, that is probably closer to, I think, what people need now. And I think that in England, I mean, overall, people are a little more based. It seems like their arts community has not been so overrun by just liberal class shit libs. I'm not saying those people don't exist in that community. It's a community that seems to attract those people. But America is just so lacking in political consciousness, particularly in amongst its artistic creators, which is tragic because a revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having. You need people in those positions to do things like this. It is desperately important for political movements to have a means of spreading the message that is entertaining and engaging. It can't all be speeches and podcasts. So this is why I keep saying the theater, the arts as an institution in America, they need to burn down because they're sucking up a lot of resources that could be better used elsewhere, and they're gatekeeping, and not in a good way. They're gatekeeping so that you don't see plays like this. Because when he laid it at the feet of the liberal class, first thing I thought was, no American production at this level would ever have made that critique. They would never have said that because it would never get out of workshop.
Well, they'd have to do a lot of reimagining. I mean, this is obviously a reimagining of the piece that's a much more forceful and on-the-nose critique of the kinds of people you're talking about. But the play itself, what's really great about this piece, and I read this a long time ago, it really is an indictment of liberalism and was also interpreted really as an indictment of liberal democracy, because basically this guy finds out a truth that's going to cost the townspeople a lot of money. He goes to print it in the newspaper and they won't print it. So he says, well, I'm just going to get on my soapbox and sing it out to the world and people are going to love me for it. And they ruin him for it. And at the end, he says something where you think about what's happening to Julian Assange right now, what Russell was out there covering. He gives a monologue in the original piece. I guess they didn't put this in this one, that, sometimes you have to stand alone. You have to be willing to stand alone if standing for the truth means standing by yourself if no one will stand with you. And we've heard Matt Taibbi talk about the character profile of the journalist, how that has devolved from that type in this play to what it is now, where it's the complete opposite of that. The last thing they want to do is be alone. Now journalists are all about elbow rubbing and networking, whereas journalists used to be the ornery, difficult, pain-in-the-ass type who didn't get along with many people anyway. That's why he is a journalist in the first place. And so this play is a great play. Now, the New York production, because of New York American audiences. Like I say, I take your point, but the text itself, like if they just do a loyal portrayal of the text, it is really a play for our times. It's a really good piece, and it's extremely relevant. I mean, we talked about that in the context of journalism. What about in the context of what's going on in Flint? I mean, that's on the nose right there.
And that's exactly what I thought. Like, if you do an update of this for an American audience that's based in Flint, that would be really interesting. And you develop it through workshop with activists. Fuck the actors. They're worthless. They're worthless. Yeah, you have to start over. You have to start with people with actual convictions. So there's your curtain call there, and you can see he's covered in paint because they wind up attacking him. But yeah, I think that there's a real hunger now for going back to doing live stuff. It was inevitable. The pendulum was going to start to swing in the other direction. You know, it's finally occurring to people that it's nice to go meet other people, right? Like, you know, like, this is all well and good, and it's great. It's brought us all together. But yeah, no, that production really inspired me, and now this is going to be a test case. So I'm going to make a gentleman's bet, although I don't think anyone in our audience is going to bet against me. This is a very interesting experiment. So when I go back to New York, I'm going to go see that production. My bet is that they are going to frame the townspeople, the bad guys, as MAGA, some kind of red statey Republican kind of thing. It is not at all going to be what this was, which was very based.
Right. And what I'm saying is, if they do that, that would be a distortion of the original text. That would be disloyal to the original text, because the original text is quite a based play.
Yeah, they're going to give it the Aaron Sorkin treatment.
The Aaron Sorkin treatment, yeah.
Nothing,
money on that.
That's where my money is. There is no way that anything that would make it to Broadway in New York City would ever be produced that is in any way in an election year a critique of the liberal class.
Right.
That's what was it's so non-existent. I was shocked by it. That's why I screamed out and applauded when I heard it. I couldn't believe that, because he had been building to it for a while, and then when that was the message he was building to, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe I saw that on a stage. So yeah, and when I first went into the theater, there were a lot of these kind of like very political theater companies. That was really common, that people would do shows about homelessness. They would do shows about poverty and these social issues. That's why I'm saying this didn't happen overnight. Like, those kinds of companies were pretty much gone by the end of the 90s. You didn't really see that anymore. I guess it was easy not to notice how gone that was from the scene when the times were less serious than they are now. And now it's just very, very glaring that you have it, because that community has just been completely overrun by liberal class children. There's a void that really needs to be filled. You know, this is a left movement, and people very often say, well, where is it going? What's the message? What's the objective? Honestly, yes, we're figuring it out, and you always have to figure it out. And there are always periods where those conversations are taking place. You're trying to figure it out. But I think part of the problem is there's no culture through which to have that conversation. There's no binding vision, partly because the function of art is to define the paradigm. It's to create symbols that it can encompass the paradigm. And there's nobody doing that.
Please clap.